Israel-Palestine conflict. This is arguably one of the biggest crises of the 20th and 21st centuries. Today, I will briefly present the entire history of this conflict. Watching this video will help you easily understand the crisis. To understand the Israel-Palestine issue, we must go back 100 years to World War I. At that time, this land was under the Ottoman Empire, meaning under Turkish rule. During the war, Britain and its allies defeated the Ottoman Empire and took control of this land. The present-day territories of Israel and Palestine were then named the British Mandate for Palestine. On November 2, 1917, British Foreign Secretary Arthur James Balfour issued a statement known as the Balfour Declaration. He expressed support for the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine. This declaration sparked intense anger among Palestinian Arabs, leading to growing tensions and conflicts between Jews and Arabs living in Palestine. This was essentially the beginning of the conflict. However, Jewish migration to this land continued to increase. However, large-scale migration began after the start of World War II. Due to Nazi persecution, Jews from various European countries fled en masse to this territory. Palestinians opposed this immigration and staged multiple revolts. Meanwhile, World War II ended in 1945.
General Jodl, the representative of the German High Command, and of Grand Admiral Dönitz, the designated head of the German state, signed the act of unconditional surrender.
By then, tensions between Muslims and Jews in this land had reached their peak. By 1946, numerous Jewish settlements had been established. Until then, most of the land where Jews had settled was purchased. Forced land seizures began a little later. The Israel-Palestine issue intensified further in 1947 when the United Nations proposed dividing Palestine into two separate states. One will be Jewish country Israel and the other will be Arab country Palestine. Since Jerusalem and Bethlehem were religiously significant to Muslims, Christians, and Jews alike, the UN proposed making them international zones under direct UN administration. Jews gladly accepted the proposal, but Arab Muslims and Christians opposed it. Muslims feared losing their land, while Christians demanded a separate Christian state including Bethlehem, Nazareth, and other Christian-majority areas. Besides Palestinian Muslims, other Middle Eastern Muslim nations also rejected the UN proposal. Meanwhile, Britain was withdrawing from its colonies after World War II. Following this trend, on May 14, 1948, Britain withdrew from Palestine. On the same day, Zionist leader David Ben-Gurion declared Israel's independence. The next day, neighboring Arab countries, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen, jointly attacked Israel. This war became known as the First Arab-Israeli War. It lasted nearly 10 months. Through this war, Israel expanded its territory beyond the UN-proposed boundaries. Meanwhile, Egypt took control of Gaza, and Jordan occupied the West Bank and the Muslim-majority eastern part of Jerusalem. During this war, around 750,000 Palestinians were displaced from their land and fled to neighboring Arab countries to save their lives. After this war, tensions flared again in 1956. At that time, Egypt blocked the Straits of Tiran and imposed a blockade on the Gulf of Aqaba. Additionally, Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal, preventing Israeli ships from passing through. As a result, Israel's trade via the Red Sea was completely halted. The Suez Canal had been built by France and Britain, and they had controlled it until Egypt's nationalization. In response, these two countries provided Israel with extensive military support, leading Israel to attack Egypt's Sinai Peninsula on October 29, 1956. This war became known as the Second Arab-Israeli War. Through this war, Israel captured the Gaza Strip and Sinai Peninsula. However, under pressure from the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Nations, Israel agreed to withdraw from Egyptian territory. In return, Egypt had to grant Israel freedom of navigation and agree not to conduct military activities in the Sinai Peninsula. It's worth noting that in this war, the U.S. was somewhat against Israel. The U.S. aimed to weaken Britain and France as global powers by preventing them from regaining control of the Suez Canal. Even after this war ended, Israel's conflicts with its neighboring Arab countries persisted. As a result, in 1967, Israel was once again involved in a war with Arab nations, which became known as the Third Arab-Israeli War. This war lasted only 6 days. During the Six-Day War, Israel again captured Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, even seizing some parts of Egypt's mainland. Additionally, it took control of the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan and occupied a significant portion of the Golan Heights from Syria. In other words, Israel not only occupied all of Palestinian territory but also captured land from Syria and Egypt during the Six-Day War. The United Nations called on Israel to withdraw from the occupied territories, but Israel refused. After their devastating defeat in the Six-Day War, Arab nations reorganized themselves and launched a surprise attack on Israel in 1973. This attack occurred on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in Judaism, which is why this war is known as the Fourth Arab-Israeli War or Yom Kippur War. Egypt, Syria, and Iraq directly participated in the war, while Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Libya, Algeria, Morocco, and Kuwait provided economic and military support. The Soviet Union supplied weapons to Egypt and Syria. Initially, Arab forces managed to seize significant portions of Israeli territory, but the United States intervened in full support of Israel for the first time. As a result, the Arab forces were defeated again. This war significantly altered the foreign policies of Middle Eastern nations. They realized that due to full Western support for Israel, defeating Israel militarily was impossible. For this reason, they focus on diplomacy. This shift explains why Middle Eastern countries today remain largely silent on the Palestinian issue. Egypt, after this war, signed a peace treaty with Israel and became the first Arab country to recognize Israel in 1979. In exchange, Israel returned Egypt's occupied territories. By 1979, Israel's map stood like this. In 1982, a Palestinian nationalist group formed by Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, known as the Palestinian Liberation Organization, launched attacks on Israel from Lebanese territory. As a result, conflict erupted once again in this disputed region. In response, Israel invaded Lebanon and occupied its southern region. During this time, Israel supported Lebanese Christian militias, who carried out the infamous Sabra and Shatila massacre, killing thousands of unarmed Palestinian refugees. This act was condemned worldwide and remains one of the most notorious events in Israel's history. Israel continued to occupy southern Lebanon until 2000, finally withdrawing due to prolonged Hezbollah resistance and international pressure. After Israel occupied all Palestinian territories, international pressure mounted for Israel to grant Palestinians autonomy. As a result, through the Oslo Accords between 1993 and 1995, Israel gradually transferred some areas of the West Bank and East Jerusalem to the Palestinian Authority. According to this agreement, Israel granted the Palestinians autonomy in the West Bank and Gaza, and in return, Palestine had to recognize Israel. In 1996, PLO leader Yasser Arafat was elected the first president of Palestine. However, Israel still retained control over Gaza at that time. Finally, in 2005, they withdrew their forces from Gaza, but they imposed a complete blockade on the Gaza Strip. And after Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2006, the Palestinian resistance group Hamas took control of Gaza. Since Hamas took control of Gaza, its conflict with Israel has been ongoing. However, it took a horrific turn in 2023. On October 7th, Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel. In response, Israel initiated a brutal military operation. In the name of eliminating Hamas, a campaign of ethnic cleansing was initiated. Women, children, and unarmed civilians were not spared from the brutality. Even schools and hospitals were not exempt from Israeli bombings. So far, Israeli forces have killed more than 50,000 civilians. Despite a global outcry of protests, Israel seems to be paying no heed to them. The Oslo Accords of 1993 outlined a step-by-step framework for the independence of the Palestinian state, but the dream of freedom remains elusive for the Palestinian people. Another point of the agreement was that Israel would not establish settlements on Palestinian land. However, disregarding the agreement, Israel has continued to displace Palestinians and construct Jewish settlements. As a result, there is uncertainty about how long the remaining Palestinian territory can survive under Israel's expansionist approach. This was a brief history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. I hope this has provided you with a comprehensive understanding of this century-long crisis. However, this was solely the political history. The religious history goes back much further. If you want to learn about that ancient history spanning thousands of years, let me know in the comments. Stay connected to my channel for more such videos.